Tonight we are going to discuss a lot of things. We're going to discuss Amendment 64, how it's affecting our businesses, the transition process, and kind of what we're going to be looking at in this huge change that we're going to be facing here pretty soon. You are allowed to record the event. We will have a live session on Inhale TV, a webinar, I guess is what they call them. INHALE.TV. So for those of you who have people at home who want to see it, you can text them, let them know. We will be streaming live. We also have a few other events coming up. On December 19th, we're going to be doing a holiday white ball and industry awards ceremony and cash hide fundraiser. On January 17th, we're doing The Heat Is On. So we're going to let you guys know what is going on as far as DUIs and kind of elaborate on the heat being on while you're in the car. January 19th, we're going to do our mergers and acquisitions open house from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. So we hope that you can all make it. Those of you who are looking for values, selling your dispensary or even purchasing some, that will be a great event for you to attend. There will be no questions asked today. It will only be the questions from the panel. So if you have any, you can submit them to cloverleafconsulting@gmail, and we will get back to you on that as soon as possible. So today, we have a wonderful elite panel of industry experts here to walk us through these questions. We have Matt Cook. Matt Cook is the former Department of Revenue Senior Director of Enforcement. Mr. Cook is the architect of Colorado's medical marijuana laws, which are most comprehensive in the nation. He now owns and operates a national regulatory consulting business. So we thank him for being here today, and we welcome him to our panel. Thank you. We also have Christian Cederberg, founding member of Vincente Consulting. Christian is one of the main reasons that we have Amendment 64. So we want to really give credit where credit is due. We need to say Christian Cederberg has done an amazing job at taking us through this. What a journey. We have Mike Elliott, Executive Director of the Medical Marijuana Industry Group. And notably, Mike Elliott has also worked on bans, which we are going to discuss tonight, which I think it was the ban in El Paso County, correct?
That's right.
So we're welcome Mike today, and we are going to discuss how that's going to affect the marijuana industry. So thank you. We also have Robert Corey. Robert Corey has single-handedly, I think, tried and won more medical marijuana cases than all of us put together. That's huge. We have Warren Edson, graduate at DU, and we all know Warren Edson has been a huge advocate for the industry. He just recently ran for our district and state council. We are excited to have Warren here tonight. We have Ann Toney on the very end. Ann Toney is, actually, she just wrote a book. What's your book called? Medical Marijuana Laws in Colorado. And Tony works with mainly DUI cases and is going to help us understand a little bit of where we're going today. Thank you for being here. We have Sean McAllister, who will be on 9 News tonight, speaking about the DUID bill, and he's one of our lead drug policy attorneys. I would read you the rest, but I can't. Right. We also have Charles Houghton. Charles Houghton is he specializes in businesses and mergers and acquisitions. He also specialized in helping write the Colorado Springs local licensing laws and works on some of the panels down there for our local municipalities. So let's say welcome to Charles Houghton and thank you for being here.
The darker it is, the better I look.
And I want to thank all of you for being here tonight as well as we're going into this change. Thank you all for coming and supporting the industry and being together. I think working together is an important thing for us now as we go forward. I mean, no matter what we think or how we feel, we're here now. And we need to work together to see how we're going to get through this and make it as pain-free and easy as possible. So, Christian, with that, I will give you the opening microphone to let us know a little bit about what Amendment 64 is and what's going on right now just in our industry in general.
Thanks, Chloe. Can you guys, okay, good. We can, the mic is working. I'm going to go a little off script and just make a couple general comments. My name is Christian Cedarberg. I worked on the campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol. The last time I was in this room was the best night of my life. I saw many of you here, and it's great to be back. First, I want to thank everyone who's here. Chloe, thank you for doing this. Thank everyone in the audience, and I also want to specifically thank Terry and the guys from the Kind Room who made me feel like a person and not a criminal years ago in Wade Ridge. Thank you guys. It's good to see you guys. I'd also like to thank all the friends and allies that supported us through this process, both publicly and privately over the past 3 years. We couldn't have done it without people, you know, holding us up when we were falling down, and it wouldn't have happened without you. I'd also, you know, like to speak to the people who didn't openly support us, and it's something that I actually supported, that idea that people in the industry would not openly support us. For all of you guys, I have the same level of respect for you now that I did before. I have an incredible amount of respect. Colorado stood on everyone in this room who's in the industry, and everyone in this room who is in any way involved. We stood on your shoulders as Coloradans to pass this thing. And for all of you, I thank you for everything you've done for the patients of Colorado and people of Colorado. Moving forward, I want to talk about, you know, what I want to express as my genuine desire for all of us who supported it, who didn't support it. For those of us, like I said, for those who supported it, didn't support it, this is my call for unity, that we all stand together. Everything that has happened in the past is the past. Everyone who has been involved, the activists, the business people, the people who are just around and, you know, doing good things for this community, we should all get together and move forward. The reality of Amendment 64 is here now, and now is the time for all of us to unite and move forward. And I think we have a very, very bright future. For the last couple of years, we've been going to debates, and I would go talk to Don Quick, who I actually like Don Quick. He's the district attorney of Brighton and Adams County.
You like him?
I do. He's a CEO professional.
He puts people in cages for marijuana.
Thank you,
You
Rob.
gotta say more.
Let's stand together, Rob.
Okay, right.
Rob, yeah, exactly. Come on, buddy.
Move to strike. I'll move to strike.
Motion granted.
Hard.
So, as a person, whatever, we'll move on, but I sat there and was sitting there at a debate where he was sitting there attacking me and telling me that what we're doing is trying to destroy kids, trying to ruin our state. I'm from Colorado, you know, and I take these things personally. And I wasn't sitting there thinking about how mad I was at him. I was sitting there thinking about how much we have in common in this community that is what matters to me about all this stuff. And, you know, forget those people. They were wrong. We proved them wrong. We proved them wrong by now over 55% as of today. And moving forward, I want everyone to be a part of this, just as I wanted everyone to be a part of it before. Same rule applies. Everything that's happened is done. We love you guys, and we look forward to a very, very bright future. So, you know, now we're at a point where my law firm, Vicente Cedarberg, which I founded with my business partner, Brian Vicente, 3 years ago, the day the law passed, we had a stated mission, which was that everyone in this state that is in prison for marijuana is a political prisoner, and that was our underlying theme of our law firm. Josh Capel, Gabby Thomas, Philip Snow, other people involved. Now we can say that it's everyone in this country and the world that's in prison for marijuana is a political prisoner that we are now fighting for, since this is now behind us. Now, we have a lot of work to do here, don't get me wrong. We have a lot of work to do on changing the Controlled Substances Act and making the law that we passed match and line up with what the actual things are behind it, which is the failed prohibition on marijuana in Colorado is over. We have a united front behind this to regulate marijuana like alcohol, not regulate marijuana like medical marijuana, which I love you, Matt, but you know, we have a new thing, and I want people should hold us to that, and that is what we're going to do. So moving forward, I'll give you guys a tiny bit of information about what's happened since the law passed. We met with the governor's chief legal counsel on Friday after the election, after his Cheetos and goldfish comment, whatever. I liked Mason's response, which is they taste a lot better than sour grapes. By the way, Mason's in Amsterdam. He's the High Times freedom fighter of the year. But we met with the governor's council. The first thing that we said before we said anything else was how insulting it was to make that comment, and how insulting to the drug policy community, the marijuana reform community, that comment was. And we made him understand that. That I know that people think we may be silent about these things, or we may be taking our time to make those statements happen, but we told the people that are going to go tell him that that's unacceptable. We also told them that the governor should be leading us as we're going out of this, not asking the federal government for permission on what should happen next. And we made it very clear that we are willing to work with him and that he needs to step up and lead. That's what his job is. And we expect that to happen. And on PBS he did give some indications, although maybe not the language I'd have chose, but I think that we're going the right direction. So that was on Friday. Over the weekend I was still running on adrenaline, thinking, what are we going to do next? So Congressman Mike Kaufman, Republican, I'm sure many of you voted for him if you're in his district, maybe not. He was, we told him that, we explained to him, me and another member of the campaign, that your district, which is a great one, Adams County, Don Quick's district, who has always wholesale rejected this concept, supposedly, voted 57-43. Arapahoe County voted 53-47. Even if you took every vote that you had in your part of Douglas County that's part of your district, we still beat you by over 100,000 votes. So we said, support this, support the idea of removing this from the Controlled Substances Act, so all the people in here are not facing a day-to-day problem of what's the federal government going to do. Now, whether or not that will pass is one thing, but the fact that we have bipartisan support, I think, speaks volumes to our ability to reach these people, and the fact that they pick up their phones and that they call us. And the next steps are the governor's panel, which many of you guys have heard about. Who knows who's going to be on that panel. I would hope that they would have proponents of the initiative on it, or of Amendment 64 on it, but if that is the case, which we don't know if it will be, all the people who are in the medical marijuana industry are at the table. And for anyone who thinks that this was designed or in any way creating a system that was going to open it up to a, Monsanto or any of these other people, I assure you that that's not true, because I wouldn't be driving the car I'm driving. If anyone's been in my office, you guys know we were not that well funded. So, but I'll say this: we want your guys' feedback. Our door is open, and my phone is always ringing. I'm the single guy on the campaign. That's why I'm here. Everyone else with their families again, So we are committed to any of you that have ideas or thoughts, and we are thinking right now about how we protect you guys when we implement this thing, because you guys are a part of this amendment. The preference was given, and it's more than just the preference that was given. The idea and everything that has happened is because of you guys. So just know that that's where we stand, and please get behind us, get with us arm in arm. This is going to be the beginning of a fight, and it's going to go for a while. So, all right, I've already gone way too long, and I'm sorry. I'm just go a little bit longer. So we won by, it's now 55.08% is what we have. We got 1.337 million votes. That's That's a 55,210 more votes than Barack Obama got. That's 483,000 more votes than Michael Bennett got. That's 422,000 more votes than Governor Hickenlooper got. We won Adams County, Denver County, Arapahoe County, Jeffco, Weld. All of them by large margins with the exception of Weld, which we only won 50%. Larimer County, we brought medical back, and we have 55.3% support for Amendment 64. There's a mandate up there. Medical marijuana will be coming back with the help of many people at this table and in this room, I'm sure. Anyone who says to you guys that Amendment 20 did not authorize dispensaries or infused products companies, or anyone that says to you guys that like this law is designed to keep this out of the hands of 21-year-old snowboarders, they're now have been proved wrong by a 10% margin in our state. So every one of you guys you guys should keep your heads high and walk and say we did this and we have a mandate now. I love law enforcement's role to a certain extent in this industry, and it's nice that it's just a very certain extent. They can do everything that they want to do, but their time of messing with you guys because they think you're bad people for supporting marijuana reform for everyone 21 and over is over. We've seen headlines across the world over the past couple of weeks. England, India, Japan, Brazil. There's a bill introduced in Mexico to legalize marijuana. There has been statements by the new president of Mexico that they need to reevaluate the drug war. Major things are happening. In the United States, we have several states, Maine, Rhode Island, Iowa, that are introducing bills in their legislatures to legalize marijuana for adults 21 and over. There's the bipartisan bill in Congress that I mentioned. There's also a sign-on letter that's being signed by a lot of people. We also have some other Republicans and very conservative, prominent conservatives that are working on things right now. The former U.S. Attorney is calling for a change in our marijuana laws, the same U.S. Attorney who I've sat on panels with and spit venom at over the past 5 years, and he's moving in a different direction. Most importantly, and the thing that made me feel best about the last 3 years of work that we've done is that in Denver, in Boulder, in Mesa County, the DAs have said that they will no longer prosecute any of the cases they have pending. Many are patients in here, but if anyone in here is not a patient, you can proudly possess your marijuana knowing that no one in Denver is no cop in Denver is going to come and cite you or do anything else to you for possessing marijuana because those days are over.
Let me just tell you, I did find out today, unfortunately, the Denver DA hasn't read the law because they are not dismissing paraphernalia cases right now. So there's still work to be done at the Denver level.
But they are petition right now, and we'll have it done by tomorrow.
Hopefully the campaign can fix that.
But anyways, I'm sorry, Clover, for going so long, and I'll end it with just again thanking everybody for your support and for your smart ideas, and for those who disagreed with me, and we had great conversations. This has been the best 3 years of my life running this thing, and let's do it.
Thank you, Christian. Okay, next we're going to ask Rob Horry, what freedoms do we have here now with Amendment 64? What is your take here on this freedom of passing of the new law here?
Well, this, first of all, is a lot better than it was even advertised. I've prepared a one-page summary of what you can do right now with Amendment 64. Obviously, there are many other summaries. Chief, the one that has to deal with the transition from MMCs over to recreational Amendment 64 shops. Is that readable? That is tough to see, isn't it?
Yeah, can we see this?
Is there a way to
That's a
grow?
lawyer's slide.
This is one page. This is one page, and you'll see. I'll explain why one page is good for you. But if you can't see it, that's all right. I'll run through it very quickly, and I do have extra copies here. What this does for you, and I've broken up into a couple of different categories. All right, and this is all immediate rights that you get. I would argue right now, and apparently the DAs of Boulder, Denver, and a few other places agree with me that it's already in effect. The governor is procrastinating like a stoner and he's not signing the proclamation yet. And there's no reason for him to procrastinate. Absolutely no reason. He has no decision to make. He must sign this thing, and he will sign it. I'm hoping he does it tomorrow, but we'll see whether he procrastinates a little more. So what this does, and I'm sorry about the smallness of it here. I should have planned that out better. First and foremost, accessories, paraphernalia, and grow equipment are legal without any limits whatsoever. No limits, including federal. Colorado is now the international leader of producing and selling grow equipment and paraphernalia because it's legal even under federal law, and here's why. And I cite this in the summary. 21 U.S. Code section 863 subsection F1 explicitly exempts under the federal prohibition of grow equipment any equipment that is permitted under any local or state law. Obviously, grow equipment and paraphernalia are permitted without limit. There's no limit to the quantity you can produce, sell. So Colorado has just made itself the international leader of grow equipment sales, which is a beautiful thing in a lot of ways. All right, secondly, marijuana itself. And you don't have to continue this fiction of, I'm selling you these lights for tomatoes. That lie is over. And the Russians do say that lies are the first casualty of war, and this war is over, so that lie doesn't have to continue anymore, which is a wonderful thing. All right, growing, processing, and transporting plants. Amendment 64, which I'm starting to call Colorado Constitution, Article 18, Section 16. It's not technically Amendment 64, it's the Colorado Constitution. And it says you can have 6 marijuana plants, 3 or fewer being mature flowering plants. And the kicker is the possession of marijuana produced by the plants. Think about that. All right, has anyone heard about this 6-plant, 2-ounce conundrum? I'm sure there are a few people that have gotten caught up in that from time to time. I've heard about that in a few cases here and there. Well, that's over too, because this explicitly says you can have whatever those 3 mature flowering plants produce. Pretty nice, huh? And what is the guidance there? I think probably the best piece of guidance for what a plant produces is probably the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, don't you think? They're the federal agency. They've studied this. And the DEA says in the publication called Cannabis Yields, United States DEA, published way back in June 1992, the DEA says, and they've never rescinded this publication, that the estimated yield is 5.1 pounds per marijuana plant. I'm taking the DEA at its word. The DEA would not lie to the American people. So when the DEA said, and back in 1992, somebody told me that the technology has gotten better since 1992 on growing. So 5.1 pounds per plant is a conservative estimate. So that gives each adult 15.3 pounds. And I'm not making this up. That is the DEA's own numbers. And this is in my summary that you should post in your grows that you're going to be building. They haven't already been. All right. And it gets better. It gets better. All right. The DEA estimates that a growth cycle is 30 to 90 days. Okay. That's what they say. That is what they say. All those press releases, here's a little aside, all those press releases when they would, seize a few garbage bags full of trash, stems, and they would, put out a press release, this is $3.3 billion in street value. Well, all that stuff comes back to haunt them now, and it'll be interesting. Now, Amendment 64, there is no requirement that the marijuana you have from previous growth cycles be destroyed or otherwise disposed of. It explicitly lets you store the products of those plants on the premises. All right? So, if you don't use those 15.3 pounds first cycle, you can store that there. There is no prohibition whatsoever, and this is a constitutional right. This is not a statutory tweak. This is in our supreme law. There's a lot we can do with this. Next category, and this will make a lot of people happy, the concentrate, manufacture, derivative, preparation, all the edibles, the tinctures, those types of things. Remember the days when they would weigh a tray of brownies and they say, well, this is 2 pounds of brownies. Therefore, patient, you've got 2 pounds of marijuana here. And there was, I will admit, a slight amount of support for that prosecutorial view, because the law did say if you mix marijuana with something, then the whole weight of it has to be counted. I mean, we usually won that argument, but we had to have that argument. We don't even have to have that argument anymore, because Article 18, Section 16 says the weight limit of any concentrate or marijuana product does not include the weight of any other ingredient combined with the marijuana. So they have to weigh the actual part of the brownies, not just all the flour and sugar and all the other ingredients that go into them. I don't know how they weigh that, but perhaps you'll have the recipes right there to show them what that goes in. Consumption, here's a big one. Here's a big one, and this one is way better than advertised, all right? It says you can't have consumption openly and publicly, and it does say and, so it's open and public consumption still remains prohibited, just like alcohol, if you think about it. Technically, you can't walk down the 16th Street Mall with your open beer. We get that. Technically, you can't walk down the 16th Street Mall smoking a joint. But what you can do is have private consumption. What is private? Home, private club, private location. This place where we sit right now, I would argue, is private. Invite only. You were invited here, you're here. This is private. Now, of course, Casstleman's can produce its own policies, and we should certainly respect whatever policies any private property owner creates. But the point is, you could have an Amsterdam-style private membership coffee shop. The day the governor signs I figured you'd like that one. There will be people getting on airplanes from Amsterdam flying to Colorado to use their marijuana publicly. It's going to be a beautiful thing. It's going to be a beautiful thing. All right, industrial hemp. Here is a huge thing that really nobody talked about during the campaign, and this may be the most exciting aspect of this, because the Declaration of Independence is written on hemp, as we all know. So we're getting America back, ladies and gentlemen. We're taking our country back. And the Constitution now says that any plant with a under 0.3% THC content is not marijuana. Yeah. It's not even marijuana. And so that means there are no limits whatsoever on industrial hemp. As long as it has 0.3% or less THC concentration, it is a crop like anything else. Wheat, roses, you name it. Zero restrictions. It's not even marijuana, so you don't get into, I have to be a 21-year-old adult, I have to grow it in a private enclosed. It's not even that. It's not even close to that. It's a crop, a beneficial industrial crop that could be grown on acres and acres throughout eastern Colorado the day the governor signs this proclamation. Now, I should take that back. The day he signs this proclamation is going to be December or January, so the growing season, the planting season will be a little bit after that, but you can certainly make your arrangements. And the very best I'll save for last, which is this. There is a constitutional right in here. You can't read it, I'm sorry about that, but there's a constitutional right to assist another adult in any of the things I just talked about. All right? What does that mean? That means you can assist another 21-year-old growing those 6 plants. That means you can assist another 100 21-year-olds growing those 6 plants. All right? Now, don't believe me. You can go as your authority to the Denver Post, November 16, 2012, where somebody was quoted who knows what he's talking about. And that's Sergeant Jim Gearhart of the North Metro Drug Task Force. All right? Here's a direct quote, and I'm going to read this from Sergeant Jim Gearhart, because the man has his faults, but he knows what he's talking about this time. Quote, "There's nothing that prohibits 100 people from each combining each of their 6 plants in one grow facility. It's just how many 21-year-olds or older you have claiming the plants. You do not even have to be a resident of the state or of the U.S. Jim Gearhart. He's been on American Weeks. He must know what he's talking about. And he comes in and tells us that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a defense, an ironclad defense. If you get your 100 adults together, and I've designed an assistance agreement. It's very brief, 1 page. And I've got copies of those. We'll project that up there in a bit. That will give you that opportunity. So I've got so much more to say, and I'll just stop now. But this is so exciting. It's kept me awake. And in conclusion, I had a baby on November 1st. Beautiful little girl named Juliet, and the excitement of 64, I'm going to be honest with you, has kept me more awake than this newborn baby has. It's that good, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to say something?
Rob Corey is a hero in this movement. He deserves all of our appreciation and respect for what he's done. But I got to say that there's some of us attorneys that give different kind of advice. I say everything that Rob Corey just said to my clients, but I also say that's the riskiest place you can be. And it is true that you could grow for 100 people, and it is true that you can keep the resulting harvest of every harvest, and a year from now you might have 60 pounds, and I would walk into court and say, you're innocent, these charges have to be dismissed. But my point is, you've got to decide what level of risk you want in this world. And the first person that steps out and says, you know what, I got 10,000 people who told me to grow for them. That sounds to me like a federal case. And I'm not telling you not to go do that, because, you know, if you do and you get busted, Rob and I are going to make a lot of money. But I'm telling you that you ought to consider how aggressive you want to be on those issues. And I also want to remind you that all this optimism, just like optimism with 1280 or with medical marijuana and dispensaries, got a big wet blanket when regulations came in, and all the things he just said, while true today, in 6 months may not be true at all, because they may walk right in and put a limit on how many people you can grow for. They may walk right in and put a boundary on how many harvests you can have. So again, I agree with Rob with what he's saying today, but those are exactly the abuses that the feds and the state are going to be looking at as reasons maybe not to allow this. And I really want to call on people to remember that part of what's going to allow this system to go forward is responsible behavior. And the first person that has 10,000... The first person that has 1,000 or 10,000 people they're growing for, and the feds call it out, it may crumble the system. So while I want you to be aggressive and assertive with what you're doing, you also need to be smart. And I really don't think it's smart to go out there and blow it up. And actually what Rob said about hemp, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, you know, you need to sit down with Rob. I encourage you to do that, but sit down with some of the rest of us. I mean, you need good advice from every angle, because if you're going to be the first head on the chopping block, you might want to make sure you got an ironclad necklace on.
Very true. Thank you, Sean. Yes, we are. This time is so unique because we have to implement a process, and just because our Constitution says that we can do this doesn't mean that each local municipality isn't going to implement a set of rules, and the state isn't going to implement a set of rules. Just like in Denver, you can only grow a total of 12 plants as a caregiver. You know, they have certain restrictions in different laws depending on where you are. So it's very important that you know that. And right now it's all good because it's all in our Constitution. We can do whatever we want, it seems like, because that's the only law. But, you know, it kind of depends on the person that you run into or that arrests you that makes that decision. And you will fight it like a DUI or anything else like that. So you want to make sure that you're not just going, you know, balls to the wall without knowing exactly what you're doing. You know, so definitely.
Well, if you run into Sergeant Jim Gearhart, you can quote his own words right back at him.
Well, I guess, but keep in mind in Amendment 64 too, if you're a current med licensee, to get that preference that we've talked about in terms of switching your license over to a retail license, it talks about having consistently complied with Section 14 of this article during the time you're licensed. So if you start getting dings, that's going to screw up your preference if you want to switch over to the retail market. So be aware of that as well.
Yeah, that's huge. Thank you. Okay, so you guys ready for the questions? All right. Question number 1. Who will be involved in assisting the Department of Revenue in the rulemaking process? And how will these individuals be chosen for these positions? Example, who's going to have majority votes? Will it include non-legislative members? Will the meetings be open to the public? What input will they seek, and will they take outside opinions? So, Christian, go ahead.
Well, just a quick clarification. So there's going to be 2 things that go on. There's going to be the legislative bodies of our state implementing legislation, which is now been pushed, or it sounds like it's going to be pushed, it's not official yet, excuse me, into a bipartisan committee of the Senate, the House, the Governor's office, the Attorney General's office, and then hopefully a number of other people. Since we won, it's like I would expect to have 6 people at the table for their 5. But we'll see. We would assume to be credible that they would have to have someone on the proponent side, if not several people on the proponent side. Then there's also the regulatory process, which is going to involve rulemaking, much like we've seen in the past with medical marijuana. We're actually working on a adjustment to the rules right now. So I would think that they would ask a lot of the people that know what's going on, the stakeholders that exist now, about that process. But the big thing is all of these things are unknowns, and when the time does come that they name this legislative group or this revenue group, again, stand united, and we'll tell them that the will of the people is not being represented at the table. Governor Hickenlooper, you got up there and told me no. You told me I was going to ruin the state and ruin the kids and ruin everything else. I respect, and he's the executive, so he's stepped up and said, well, I'm going to implement the law. I would disagree with it. The Attorney General's office, we all know that he's not been a fan, and he has been a vocal opponent, but he's going to do his job defending this law. But he also has a seat at the table. The legislators, they should understand that in all of their districts, we got a majority of those districts, but there's also political concerns there. So that's why we need to be very assertive in making sure that we have a substantial role, which I expect we will, because if we don't, we'll tell them that it's not credible with our, we'll get 1.3 million Coloradans behind us telling them that. So.
Does anybody else want to elaborate on that? Matt?
If I may, Chloe, first of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to participate in this forum. I think I'm the only one here that's not going to give you free legal advice, but there are both sides of me here, so whatever that's worth. But as it relates to the rulemaking process, government approaches rulemaking really by the letter of the law, and that process is varied based upon the administrator that's really at the helm. And what Christian said, at this point, you've got a legislative session that's going to start January. They will define some parameters and put some things in place as required by the amendment. They'll probably go a little bit further than that. And I would advocate that it is at that very step that the industry really needs to get a voice, and they need to get someone's ear, and they need to be involved. Just real briefly, the Administrative Procedures Act under Title 24 in Colorado really sets forth the rulemaking process. And I can tell you that as a matter of law, it requires that a notice be posted. There's a time frame associated with that, and that a hearing be held, and that written testimony and written comments as well as verbal testimony be taken. And the agency only needs to have what they call a rational basis to promulgate a rule. Different standard, a different legal standard than most are used to. Certainly it doesn't rise to the level of being a criminal standard. But with that said, really where I'm going with that is it's really subject to interpretation. My guess is that they will probably pull from a number of the regs that are already in place that are used for the medical marijuana side of the house. Many of them are quote-unquote rational. They've been in law now for just about 2 years, a little over 2 years.
Some of them are problematic. It's certainly not a perfect process, but I can assure you they'll pull from that. But the critical part here is there's no requirement that they put a workshop together. There's no requirement that they seek input outside of a hearing from the industry that they intend to regulate. I can't imagine good government implementing a process without seeking that input from the people that you're going to regulate. It makes no sense to me, and that's the way I did it my entire career. It's the only way that it effectively works. But they only need to have the rational basis. The other thing you need to know is the Amendment 64 requires that these rules be promulgated no later than July 1st, 2013. That time is going to be here before long. And I'll tell you, the legislature starts in January. They're going to have to put notice up to meet that July 1 deadline, I believe, by February 1st. That means the hearing has to be held by March 1st. You're on the fast track then to meet that July 1 mandate, and it's just, I would just encourage that who's ever going to be at that table really look at those deadlines, those timelines for the APA, for the rulemaking process, and get a voice. But if you can get involved, get seated very early in that legislative process, and a legislator says to the executive director of the Department of Revenue or the head of the agency that's going to regulate this industry that they would like to have a work group put together, chances are politically that may happen. So something for you to consider.
Thank you, Matt. Mike?
Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Elliott. I'm the Executive Director of the Medical Marijuana Industry Group. We're a trade association here of all Colorado medical marijuana businesses that have really been on the front line of this from the start. And primarily, I think what we've really excelled at has been the lobbying effort at the state capitol. Although our mission is broader than that, we have some fantastic state lobbyists that have gone forward to the state legislature and really pursued the protection and the promotion of the Colorado medical marijuana regulatory framework. So today I'm very excited to be part of this panel. And I think as far as the governor's task force that's been announced to implement Amendment 64, well, I think we'd love to be a part of that. I'll also say though that if we're not a part of that, it's not necessarily the end of the world. We can work the legislators and put that message out there about finding really responsible ways of implementing this. And I'll tell you, my group is, we've been the medical marijuana industry group. We've been, focused entirely on medical marijuana. We ended up not taking a position on Amendment 64 because, as we saw it, it fell outside the scope of our group. But certainly with Amendment 64, it's going to have vast, dramatic impact on medical marijuana and how it's implemented going forward. So we plan on being heavily involved, but really, I think we see ourselves following the lead of folks like Christian Cederberg over here, who have done so much work to get us to where we are today. And we really want to make sure that, at this point, still that the medical marijuana businesses and the patients are, that there's safe access to marijuana for those patients in need here in Colorado. And I think the outstanding question, which I know we're really going to jump into, it's going to be a difficult question for us to answer tonight, but really, what is the federal government going to do with all this? Are we really going to be allowed by the federal government to regulate these commercial businesses and allow them to start up and start selling? And that's really the big unknown, but we'll have to deal with that when it comes up, and I look forward to talking about that piece more as this conversation unfolds.
Thank you.
Just real quick, I promise
Sean, go for it.
I promise I won't talk to everyone, but I actually did want to back up and thank everybody in this room and in Colorado who worked for this initiative. I've obviously helped start Sensible with Ryan and supported this from the beginning. It's very satisfying and appreciate everybody that phone banked, just like Christian said. But I also had been asked to be NORML's spokesperson in Colorado, and I just wanted to mention on this point that we sent a press release today and to the governor's office saying that marijuana consumers have to have a place at the table in any kind of committee or commission on this issue. And again, I trust and respect the campaign to represent people well, but I think there needs to be more than that. We also called on the governor to have the majority of seats on this commission be supporters of marijuana reform, because the majority of Colorado voters supported this, and we should not allow law enforcement to dominate the process. We just reminded the governor that all meetings would be covered by the Sunshine Law and must be open, and people must have an opportunity to give input, and whether, again, it's a formal commission that has formal members or a legislative committee, people should get involved, and they should demand that we have sensible regulation on this thing, and not, a lot of the things Mike is talking about, there's going to be a lot of conflicts, a lot of compromise offered, but I support the campaign's position right now that we shouldn't come to the table immediately offering compromise. We should come to the table and ask them to implement the will of the voters and not start making compromises at the beginning.
I agree, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to the next question. What should current MMCs expect to see during this transition and implementation process, and what is the timeline? What likelihood will marijuana be similar to medical marijuana? Can we have retail and MMJ centers in the same location? And if I have 6 medical marijuana centers, does that mean I'm eligible to apply for 6 recreational licenses? Go for it.
Well, I think the 800-pound elephant is really going to drive the answer to this question. That's the unknown, and that is, what's the federal government's response going to be to Amendment 64? Clearly, they have left the medicinal side of things alone for 2.5 years in this state, and I think that's very telling as well as to where their position is, or what their position is with this. But nonetheless, until that question is really answered, and until the legislature acts and gives some parameters and a rulemaking process begins, the key is clear and unambiguous compliance with state law. And I cannot overemphasize it. If you're on the medical side of things, you've got to follow the letter of the law. Don't give anybody a reason, obviously, to cause a federal action and intervention of any sort at this point. Very early on, Chris used the term responsible. It's about a responsible industry going forward, and I couldn't echo that enough.
Thank you. Okay, we passed a bill to regulate marijuana like alcohol. What similarities do these two industries have, and what will be different? Was that a title to help voters understand legalization, but would be conflicting if they were regulated the same, or how do you think that's going to work?
I'll start with the, was this to help voters understand legalization? Part of it's to help voters understand that we regulate substances that, psychoactive substance alcohol or recreational substance alcohol, which by all measures, marijuana is safer than. That message and that understanding and that kind of equating it to that issue, we thought would be an effective message, and I guess we were right. As far as what this means for, how the two industries are similar, how they're different, I think that without getting too far into the weeds, sorry guys, that was not a pun. I use that saying all the time, and every time I say it, I get that reaction. It's interesting because I'll get a little bit, deep into how my mind has been racing since I sleep like an hour a night these days. And when you think of alcohol prohibition ending, you had the rise of large breweries, large distilleries. Over the past 70 years in, say, Denver and other communities around the state, things have gotten a lot better from my perspective in terms of what this means, in that when I walk into a liquor store, there's a broad variety of products for me to choose on the alcohol levels, the beer level. Right now, there's 4 new brew pubs or tap rooms or whatever they are that have opened very close to my house that are, I think a net benefit to, our communities, and I think it makes it an interesting place. And, the concept of this being regulated just simply retail stores that are like liquor stores and large producers that are independent, I think that there's much more to it than that. And I think that in terms of preserving all the work that you guys have done that are in the industry out there, accepting and acknowledging the fact that you were the ones, I was telling this to excise and licensing director today. I said, the bootleggers or whatever, we're not going to kick them out. We're going to protect them, and we're going to make what they've done, preserving their genetics, their techniques, their ideas. We're going to do everything in our power to preserve that concept going forward. And for those people worried about the very large grow coming in and wrecking the market or doing whatever, I think we have credible arguments that under our alcohol code, it doesn't have to go that way. And people may or may not agree with me on that. I'm simply making the point that there's a lot more to it than the very basic concept of, crap, now I'm gonna have to compete. I spent all this money building grows, I spent all this money doing this and that, and now where am I gonna stand in 6 months? I think there's a lot more to it. And if anyone wants to talk about it, I talk about it all day and all night these days. So so there's a lot more to alcohol than people think.
Well, and kind of an interesting side note, last time we were here, Bob Deal produced a Department of Revenue fiscal code worksheet that he got through CORA, Freedom of Information Act. And a couple times throughout this worksheet, the Department of Revenue reverts back to, well, we're going to do this like we do in alcohol. And that's something we haven't traditionally heard in some rulemaking, whether it's to the excise licensing or other issues. That's something that we need to keep in mind, and through Mike's organization and other lobbyist efforts, push that effort to, get away from some of the 1284 shackles and get more to like the regulations around them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think what you'll see from a legal standpoint, the campaign was right on target when it said regulate marijuana like alcohol. That's how this is written. And the alcohol industry doesn't have a 70-30 requirement. It doesn't have vertical integration. The legislature got it exactly backwards. They said the corner liquor store has to own Coors Brewery. That's what the legislature foisted on us. Those mistakes will be avoided this time around if the legislature is even involved with this. Because if you read the amendment that the voters passed, it does not grant the legislature any power to create these regulations. In fact, it specifically says the Department of Revenue is going to create the regulations. The Department of Revenue did not create the 70-30 regulation. That was the Colorado legislature. The Department of Revenue did not create vertical integration. Again, that was the Colorado legislature. So what you're going to see and how this is designed, it's going to be much more like alcohol than it is like medical marijuana. We've learned our lessons with medical marijuana. Some of them were tough lessons, some of them were good lessons. But the way this is structured is it mirrors the alcohol code and the alcohol regulation, which makes a lot of sense in some ways. Of course, there are problems with that, but far fewer problems than what we've seen with medical marijuana. And you have this backstop in Amendment 64 that no regulation can be unreasonably impracticable. So from a legal standpoint, that's a new concept that is not merely rationality review. And this is in the amendment. It says that the measures, something is unreasonably impracticable if it requires such a high degree of investment of risk, money, time, or any other resource or asset that the operation of a marijuana establishment is not worthy of being carried out in practice by a reasonably prudent business person. The other thing that you don't see in here that's restricted are restrictions on people's distant past. All right? You made a mistake in 1995 and picked up a felony for cultivation of something that's perfectly legal now, by the way, perfectly legal. You're not shut out of this industry like you are with medical marijuana, which was ridiculous. The legislature made that up. There are good people who know how to grow marijuana, and they picked up a charge here and there. We should bring those people back into this industry because they have knowledge that we can use. There's also no restriction whatsoever on out-of-state investment. This is what the legislature did. The legislature said, we don't want you bringing in money and jobs to our state from out of state. That is basically what the legislature did when it passed 1284. It was ridiculous. It was utter malpractice. We should be attracting business to Colorado. And any other business, we do attract to Colorado, and we give them tax breaks to bring their businesses to Colorado. So that residency restriction is not here. Obviously, those people who are here now on the ground floor are in the front seat. You have the preference if you're an MMC owner. And we designed it that way, and there's a good reason for that, because it was a way to get the industry behind this, which they were. So that was a good thing. So you're still in the driver's position, and you can bring in investment from out of state. And the out-of-staters don't, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, have the preference for starting a retail shop. They're going to have to piggyback on those Coloradans who are already here. But at least you can get loans and investment from somebody sitting in LA, or somebody sitting in New York, or somebody sitting in London, or somebody sitting in Amsterdam. You have that opportunity, and that's a good thing.
That's our next question, too. We're going to talk about investment spend.
Just to follow up with what Rob said, part of this is going to be driven again by the rulemaking process. In A64, there's actually one of the rule mandates is the department's going to have to determine the qualifications for licensure that are directly and demonstrably related to the operation of a marijuana establishment. Now, if everybody lined up and rendered an opinion as to really what that means in plain English, none of us would agree, right? And so that's why it's critical that you have a voice again in that legislative process very early on to help define some of those parameters going forward. But really what I wanted to tell you is in a previous life, I had one. In a previous life, I regulated the alcohol beverage industry for about 30 years, so I know a little bit about that side of things. And just to kind of let you know what you could potentially see, having read A64 as well, Colorado employs, as do many states, something called the traditional three-tier system. And ironically, I've been to California 10 times this summer to talk to them about cannabis regulation, and this is the very model that I've proposed to them. But nonetheless, there are three tiers: manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. And what I suspect is Laura Harris, who's the director of MMED currently, also came from the beverage alcohol side of things, and she will probably, at least in the very early stages, look at that system. Now, the perils to that system and why it's set up that way, it was truly structured so that retailers had to operate independent of wholesalers, and wholesalers independent of manufacturers. And that is, each tier had to operate on their own. They couldn't receive assistance, direction, control, or anything from the other, because that's how you control the market, right? It's how you get a monopoly. And that's what Prohibition taught us. The manufacturers were telling the bars in those days when they could open, what kind of beer they would serve, how much they would sell it for, to whom they would sell it, all of those kinds of things. And so my guess is, historically, they will probably look at a lot of the basic tenets of that regulatory model that's been around since the repeal of Prohibition, going forward when they craft the model for this industry. So something to think about.
I would just quickly throw in the caveat that there are other protections against the very concerns of the three-tiered system, and the three-tiered system has created monopolies or an oligopolies amongst manufacturers and distributors. That's why you have every liquor store that you go to, with few exceptions, is run by people that work way harder than most of the people in here, perhaps. And I know I don't say that about many, because I know how hard we all work. But these are people that are working 7 days a week. Families often start small liquor stores, and that's what they do. They're beholden to the whims of the large distributors and large manufacturers who have then grouped together with the distributors who make all the money. I am going to reject that wholesale in concept when I'm trying to move forward with this, because I do not want to give the power back to wholesalers. If anyone in this room, takes offense to that, that's fine. We can talk. I'll explain to you why I think that the marketplace should exist in a way that will be efficient, but in a way that should give everyone in this room who stuck their necks out, whose shoulders we stood on to get this thing done, and why you guys deserve to preserve your, the environment that you live in. So.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the alcohol industry is limited to one retail store per owner, and so that's a difference that is not in the medical rules. And also everything, again, Rob said is true today. No vertical integration requirement, no 70-30, no felon ban. It could not be true in 6 months when they pass regulations that may require that. So that's why what Matt said, we have to stop some of those things, or come to compromises, because certain people, even at this table, will advocate residency restrictions to help the transition period. So it is a big deal.
We have to acknowledge the fact that we are the first to do this. We're going to be the leaders in this, and do we want someone to jump off our backs and do it somewhere else and allow that place to be the leader of this industry? So we have to be very, very smart, strategic, and we got to think about these things. And I bet you there's 100 good ideas out there that I haven't heard yet. So these are the things we got to think about as we're moving forward. forward, because we can't be overly protectionist for what we're doing. We have to think about these things very hard. We have to think about the best way to move forward, and then we have to move forward together. That's the biggest thing.
To get back to the elephant in the room of what the feds are going to do, I think Rob did a very good job talking about what we can do. I think the question, though, that maybe we need to be asking is what we should do. And what is the framework that is going to keep the feds out, if that's really what the goal is. And it gets down to, well, I think what we have done very well with the medical marijuana framework is we've very much so based it on this 10th Amendment argument that Colorado here is a laboratory of democracy, that we're going to pursue this, that we have the right to do this without the interference of the federal government, and we can see what the reaction will be. Obviously, with this election, there's a lot of signs pointing to the people of this state being okay with what we've set up so far, obviously. But the question is, how open is the system going to be? Are we going to break down our 10th Amendment arguments and allow people from Amsterdam, for instance, or Amsterdam's a bad example, but let's say Mexico, or any other country to come here and purchase? And how does that affect our 10th Amendment arguments, and is that really inviting the federal government to come in here? Is that really what we want to do?
I think that should, I'm sorry, Christian.
Well, I think it's that another question, but I'd also like to just respond to this.
Yeah, let's discuss this issue.
Here's the deal. Let's think about rational regulation and what will happen if we did prohibit people from coming and doing exactly what you said. We'll end up creating another black market or gray market or whatever you want to call it of people that are supplying to those people. When we're opening our argument with the federal government, with all due respect to everyone's positions on what this means and whatever, I'm not giving up the fact that 55% of Coloradans voted for this. I understand the federal government's going to have concerns. If they're reasonable concerns can be addressed under the framework that we designed, I'm all for it, because smart ideas come from all sorts of weird places. People that have been wrong about something for, 10 decades and decades, that's fine. I'm sure they got some good ideas. But to have an opening argument or an opening, and Mike, I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but to start out with a position of giving them something that they don't deserve, period, which is that if you're in Colorado and you have an ID that's issued by the government that says you're 21 years or older, or forget the ID, if you're 21 years or older, you will not be prosecuted under our state laws, period. So to create a system that would close out people who fly here, or close out people who want to come here and see the way that society should be, not the way society is wrong. From my perspective, this is going to be the problem. We're going to be sitting at the table telling all these people, we beat you. You came to me, you told me I was wrong. You were wrong. We've got 400,000 more votes than you got last time you ran for governor. And now you're going to use the federal boogeyman with me? That's fine. I understand why you're going to use it, but for that to diminish what we've done and what we can do, no. We are going to say what we said to the governor right after the election to his people. I said, do you guys have reasonable suggestions, federal government? Give them to us. If you've thought of this stuff, I've thought about it 10 times longer than you've thought about it, for sure, in the last 10 minutes, So we have to come to the understanding amongst all of us and everyone in here that, and again, this will be a table, there will be some sort of forum for this to happen, that we cannot give up what we want. We cannot kowtow to and lose what we got because we're afraid of federal intervention. Now, we address it, but we have been the minority party at the table this entire time. Since 2000, we've been the minority party. I've had to kiss people's asses, I've had to call people a million times, kill them with kindness, send them gifts, whatever. My style will not change because that's what I do. I'm a nice guy, but we're the majority party. We need to exercise our rights as the majority party under the 10th Amendment, which does not mean that the 10th Amendment ends as soon as we go too far. This is not an attack on Mike. This is not an attack on you at all, man. Mike and I talk about this all the time too.
Yeah. Christian, you are a very, very nice guy, by the way.
You're welcome.
That, I'm sure 55% of the voters would agree. So, just to start off here, because, part of this, I'm in a bit of a conflicting situation here because, medical marijuana is still my battle. That's what my group is doing. So I'll tell you, to start off with, I am very much so an advocate of being very, very aggressive in having our movement be on the offense. I hate being on the defense. And to be real honest, I think that's the biggest criticism of our movement that I would lay out, is that we're constantly being on the defense. And so I'm certainly not advocating that we give up a lot before it starts. But I would also say that we do need to distinguish between what is right and what is smart. And they might be completely different things.
Let me give one story that just kind of presents what I'm telling you guys out there. The day after the election at the Air Force Academy, a friend of mine who works for ESPN, all of their crews sat at an individual table with a bunch of other Air Force Academy cadets. The Master at Arms, or whatever it's called, came out and announced that President Barack Obama will remain the president. He's the commander-in-chief. The chain of command is the most important thing that exists in the military. Also, everyone saluted, whatever. Also, Amendment 64 passed in Colorado, which legalizes marijuana for adults 21 and over. The whole place erupted. There's no cameras. This is by tradition, this is a place where cameras are not. And then he said, unfortunately, he didn't say unfortunately. That's what it said in my mind. But he said, for those of you who think this means you can use marijuana, the military's position has not changed on the use of marijuana. You still can use it. The whole place started booing him and waving their hats, and the idea, when you think about what's happening right now, that they have the upper hand, they have the upper hand from a legal perspective, but we have the momentum, the spirit, and the people behind us. And the people that are going to be the officers in the United States Air Force, for them to act that way, that message gets back to the president and his people. When you watch TV and Jon Stewart puts on headphones because of how loud people are cheering when they talk about this thing happening, we have the momentum. Yes, we do have a legal issue. Yes, we do. We got Mike Kaufman, Diana DeGette, Ed Perlmutter, and gosh, what am I forgetting? Who's never going to talk to me? Jared Polis. All people to forget, Jared Polis. We have these people now that have our back in a way that fundamentally changed things from November 5th to November 6th. All the people that I've had to convince that this is not going to bring the feds upon you, do any of you truly think that there's a higher likelihood of the feds coming to your place now than there was on November 5th? Some might. Thank you for all those that said no. But I'm just saying, we are on the right side of history. We need to lead, and we need to flex that muscle with total deference to certain things, but not to the fundamental principle that the drug war, specifically marijuana prohibition, is a failed policy. The country's rejecting it, and it's our time to
Thank you.
On the feds real quick, moderator. I don't think we can assume that Barack Obama, if you've studied him even a little bit, Barack Obama is a marijuana smoker himself. The only difference between Barack Obama and a lot of my clients is he didn't get caught, they did. All right? So there's that. Do not assume that this second-term president, who doesn't have to run for re-election again, who doesn't want to be a historical figure, don't assume he opposes Amendment 64. Amendment 64 was such a game changer that the feds have to take notice. They have taken notice. In fact, this got, as has been alluded to, 50,000 more votes than Barack Obama himself in Colorado. So there are 50,000 people out there, literally, who voted for marijuana and didn't vote for Barack Obama. 55. They notice that. They understand that. They want to be on the right side of history. The federal government, the United States Department of Justice, does have an admirable history. They've done some horrible things to people over the years, but they've also done some good things. And do not assume that they're necessarily against this. And by the way, the silence is deafening from them. All right? Did anybody hear the Department of Justice say one single word about Amendment 64 during the entire campaign? They said zero. They said nothing about it. And they did say something about it in California. The United States Attorney General came to California, said, vote against this. If you don't, we'll do this, this, and that. They didn't even say that here. They didn't even make a threat. They were silent. And there is a plausible legal defense, an actual legal defense. Silence is consent. So they had their chance to opine on Amendment 64. The federal government, they had plenty of chances. They declined to issue any opinion. They were even asked to come here. The No on 64 campaign, a bunch of right-wing, federalist, conservative Republicans begged the Obama administration to come here to Colorado and tell us rednecks what we should do with our state constitution. And the Department of Justice declined. They said, sorry, we're not, they didn't say anything. They didn't even say no. They just did nothing. So don't assume that the feds are necessarily against this, because they can read 64. And by the way, that's their press release after 64 passed. We're studying Amendment 64. Studying it. This has been out there for a year, and you're smart lawyers with the Department of Justice. You know every single word that's in 64. So no, you're not studying it. You know what it says. What you're studying.
They're studying the politics.
Yeah, you're studying 55% of Colorado voters who pay taxes and pay for your salaries. That's what you're studying, and you're thinking hard about that. So, you know what? At this point, and I said this 2 weeks ago, I'm just going to stop demonizing the federal government. I'm going to stop attacking them. I'm going to stop saying anything negative about them, because until informed otherwise, I am assuming they are on our side. The federal government has not informed us that they're against us. And the Attorney General of Colorado says, please state your intentions, Federal Caesar. Please tell us what you intend to do. They've said nothing. So the silence continues, and I'm going to take an optimistic view and assume they're on our side until informed explicitly otherwise.
And they're studying the fact, nobody has talked about this, that the youth vote in Colorado went from 12% in 2008 to 20% in 2012. And so we did increase the youth vote. We lost seniors by 45, 55, but that's close. We won 40% of Republicans. In Washington State, we put the youth vote from 12 to 25%. What Democratic Party that depends on young people to win is going to betray its own voters?
What Republican Party, for that matter?
Thank you. Okay. Well, since we're already on the federal subject, we might as well stay there. Will A64 allow out-of-state investment? Rob seems to believe it will, in recreational MJ businesses. But how safe will those investments be given the federal status of MJ and the Blue Sky ruling?
It depends on what happens with the DeGette stuff. It depends on how they posture. There's all sorts of plausible avenues besides file a lawsuit, kick indoors, don't do anything. There's actually a bunch of varying degrees in there. And as far as the out-of-state investment is concerned, this is a little bit different than the residency, required ID, which I feel obviously very strongly about. That is something that, depending on how it's outlined, that would then involve interstate commerce in a much more significant way than the Reich case, or than these kind of really, the intrastate model that Matt here developed to really show that this is not going to touch interstate commerce. But again, it's one of those things that I'm waiting to see how they react. I'm waiting to see, not they, the feds, I'm waiting to see how the state reacts and what they think is right. I mean, there is a certain level of people, I'm sure people in this room, that feel very strongly that all of a sudden a bunch of money flooding in here to bolster up businesses that shouldn't be there maybe in the first place, or to start businesses that will only make us all look bad. Those are very, very legitimate state concerns. Again, I'm not going to talk about whether or not we should do it because of the feds, but there are legitimate state concerns for addressing the issue of out-of-state investment. And, it happens anyways now. There's people that think they've figured out ways to do it. It's generally not the way we practice, but there certainly are, people that have figured out things to do inside the rules, on the edge of the rules, whatever. But I think it makes sense for us to have a serious discussion about this with the legislature. And also it makes sense to have backup plans which say that at some point, if the Controlled Substances Act does change, because it's over, it's just a matter of time, with marijuana, at that point, do we want to lock ourselves into a situation where we don't have out-of-state investment? At that point, do we want to allow like I said, Colorado to take the lead, as we should and as we've earned on this issue going forward. And so this is why, as many smart people at the table as possible to think about these things is exactly what's needed. And, again, I don't approach it from what are the feds going to do. I'm approaching it for what's good for Colorado.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next question. DUI, DUID. Okay, even though MMJ states have lower DUI arrests than non-MMJ states, A64 keeps driving under the influence law in the Constitution. And I know we've been fighting this bill at every single legislative session. I don't see how we could have passed it without it. I mean, being that we're regulating it like alcohol, and that's what we do. That's probably the big money maker here. How are we going to go about this, and what can we expect for these DUIs? Mike?
Yes, so basically Amendment 64 did not affect our DUID laws in Colorado at all. In Washington, they actually had 5 anagrams per se written into the law that was passed there. But I'll tell you that MMIG, we've made it, I imagine we've spent more resources defeating the 5 anagram per se bill than probably any other issue that we've worked on. And that's because, well, one of the reasons is because this thing just keeps coming back. This is a zombie bill. I can't tell you. I've been embarrassed the amount of times I have emailed everyone I know saying this bill is dead, and then in some cases 10 minutes later it's back alive again. I think it was 10 minutes, yes. Now, I mean, here's the thing. This issue, Chloe and I just talked about it earlier today. The January 17th version of this, the Cloverleaf Forum, is going to be on this issue. And why? It's because we've got way more to talk about than we have time for right now. But to give you a very brief piece of information, something that is not really out there in the public, that is extremely important, is that this group called the CCJJ, that's the Colorado Commission on Criminal Juvenile Justice, well, they just took a position on DUID going forward. And that matters because this commission has really been put together by the governor's office. The Attorney General has a seat there, district attorneys have seats there, defense attorneys, some other state agencies. It's a powerful, powerful group. And the original 5 nanogram per se bill originated with the CCJJ back in the late 2010, and then they pushed forward in 2011. This group, after a long period of deliberation, just voted, I believe it was a week and a half ago, to endorse not 5 nanograms per se, but 5 nanograms permissible inference. And when we look at that, I know, well, I'm judging by the silence in this room that nobody knows what on earth that means. Hence why we need a forum about it. Because I think there's going to be some disagreement about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But to give you a very brief overview, if it's per se, that means you cannot introduce evidence that you were not impaired. If it's permissible inference, that means you can. And why this is such a significant thing is that Senator Steve King, who has been leading this effort to pass per se, he's a member of the CCJJ. He was okay with this compromise. And I think, and gee, I say this and now I have to catch myself every time because the zombie per se bill keeps coming back alive. Because Senator King was the one who was going to push per se, and now he's on the CCJJ and they've endorsed permissible inference, I believe per se might, possibly, maybe, could be dead. But permissible inference is alive and well, and it's going to probably be a much more popular proposal with the legislators. And I think we as a community are going to have to decide, are we for it? Are we against it? Do we just say that this is the reasonable compromise that we've been fighting for over the last couple of years? And there you go. So that'll be in January, and I'll stop there.
Okay, awesome.
Well, I want to hear Ann, but you don't have anything else?
Well, no, when I heard that, Mike just told me earlier this evening, I see that as an important compromise because what I said was now we have a fighting chance. I think it's unrealistic to believe with the way well, that's not fair either. We've won for the past 2 years. So maybe we can win the third year. But with the way they continue to go at it with Mark Waller and Steve King, and I'm sure the whole law enforcement community are so adamant that we just have to have this per se. The fact that we have a fighting chance with the inference allows you, what it does for you, if you get caught and charged with DUID, it allows you to go to trial. I mean, theoretically, you could convince district attorneys that your client wasn't impaired, but you know that'll probably fall on deaf ears. But you could go to trial and, in front of a jury, present evidence that this person clearly was not impaired, because chronic users, you know, carrying 5 nanograms in your blood of THC is commonplace. The last piece that I think is the most important, or very important, if we do get the permissive inference, to educate folks in the community to not take the roadsides. It's voluntary. Do not take the roadsides, because then you take away a lot of half of their evidence against you. And then they want you to go do the DRE exam, which is a big roadside. Don't do it because that is voluntary. So if we take away the roadsides and you don't do them, and you take away the DRE, and all you have to do is give blood to keep your license so you don't lose it for a year or more, now you're in great shape if you want to fight it. So I won't take up all of our time, but you know, there's possibilities here. At least we have a fighting chance.
And that possibility, correct, is only if you blow, because state law says that if you get pulled over by law enforcement, you're required to give blood or urine if they ask you for it. So if you don't blow or you don't give them urine or blood...
If you don't take the test, you lose your license.
Yeah.
The advice is don't take the roadsides, take the blood or breath test if they're dumb enough to give you that. But let me just a quick minute on this, because I was the unfortunate short straw drawer that with Mike served as co-chair of the DUID task force in 2011 when we recommended against it. But before I say my comments on that, I'm going to have to leave early. I want to thank Chloe for all her work putting these things together. I also want to remind everybody, if you want to find me, lawindenver.com, LAWINDENVER, lawindenver.com. We represent a ton of dispensaries. We give patients discounts on criminal defense, DUI, family law, if you're medical marijuana, 30% discount on fees. But bottom line is, no, I mean, you know, we put our money where our mouth is, and we defend the community. But this issue is not going away, and I am not a proponent of the permissible inference, because when you tell a jury you can presume somebody is high, they will presume they were high. So I think we got to figure out other alternatives. I know Mike deserves a ton of credit for the work he's doing, but I think he's heading in the right direction, because he's saying that we need to make the roadsides better, maybe marijuana specific. We need to look at other factors, because the blood test does not correlate to mental impairment, and we can never give up on that idea, and people need to understand the science is not clear. So yeah, look out for that.
Thank you, Sean.
On this DUID topic, though, keep in mind we're talking about 5 nanograms and setting a standard in this case that not only will affect you in the criminal law and DUID world, but can trickle down into the wonderful world of social services and divorces. And it would really suck if we set a standard of like 5 nanograms that then we're dealing with social service caseworkers who are saying mom and dad are always intoxicated under that standard. And for most patients in regular recreation, it's exactly the case. And what kind of field day could you have, particularly in some of these rural counties, with a divorce where one parent or the other is a recreational marijuana user, and you get to kick back and argue a parenting time schedule where one parent is always intoxicated under the 5 nanogram standard. So, you know, I'm personally not only worried about the DUID thing, but then them coming and taking our kids.
That's huge. All right, well, I guess we're going to finish up with any closing new business opportunities. Anything last minute things you want to say as far as the opportunity here, Charles?
One thing I would caution everybody is that just like a lot of things that we've seen, what you're allowed to do is going to be governed by where you are. And if you are in a jurisdiction that bans recreational marijuana and you've invested millions of dollars in buying a warehouse or buying a retail center or whatever, it's going to be too bad, so sad. The city governments do not advertise in a way that you're going to be able to ferret it out easily. So watch your city councils and make sure you understand what they're doing, because they can do something as benign and say, okay, we're going to do 1,000-foot separation between you and schools, you and each other, you and parks, and if you draw enough 1,000-foot circles, you wind up with a 10 square foot area underneath a bridge somewhere. So watch these people and make sure that you're heard. If you want the business to move forward, you cannot let them walk all over you, and they will if you let them. Sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's inadvertent, but you have to be the educators, because you're the ones who know what it's going to take in order to operate in the area that you want to operate. So you got to watch them.
Don't forget 280E and that whole tax situation.
Yeah, you know, that was one of my questions, and we might as well just say that since we're on it. You know, if we don't tax this right, it's already taxed so heavily in the medical marijuana market. We just put this in our Constitution. We don't want to enter into the big old black market in the world. We have to tax this right. And so I don't know how, you know, that's going to go as far as the implementation process, but I mean, I hope it's not any worse than it already is, but you know, I would hope that, you know, the 280E is basically saying that you can't write off any of your retail expenses, things like that. Do you think that's going to be different for recreational?
Again, it depends on what happens with the federal legislation going forward. One quick side note that's banking also with this issue. When we talked to the governor's office, we told him that when you're talking to Eric Holder, please mention the fact that you are causing a public safety hazard here by not allowing us to have banking. And now, Governor, it's on you. So on the 280E piece, I think we've moved a giant step forward in saying that 280E does not contemplate any of this. When it was written, it didn't contemplate what's happening now, and now it's compromise on the table. We're opening up the tax code, you know, to do all sorts of wonderful things this next federal legislative session, and we got our people in place to make the moves to change that.
Awesome. All right, you can find a copy of this video on www.yourmmjinfo.com. You can visit us. Any questions you have, you can send to cloverleafconsulting@gmail.com. I want to thank the panel for being here tonight. You guys did a wonderful job. And any questions you have for them, let us know. We'll send you their way. Thank you for all being here. Make sure to look up Sadie Lane. We have Sean on the back. She just wrote a book here, The Colorado Marijuana Highway 420. And a lot of the people she wrote about in this book could actually sign it for you. I know Matt Cook, Rob Corey. We have a few people in here that are in the book, so feel free to stop by on your way out. Thank you for coming.